Dr. Phyllis Kominsky is my guest today, and let me tell you a little bit about her. She's an adjunct professor of social work at Fordham University and the president of the Association for Deaf Education and Counseling. She's also the author of the book, Getting Back to Life: When Grief Won't Heal. She's the perfect person I wanted to talk with today, especially about grief as we're going through this pandemic. And so, Phyllis, thank you so much for joining me today.
For having me, Sherrie.
So tell me, because a lot of people are feeling fear, they're feeling anger, they're feeling anxiety, and what they're not realizing is that these are signs of grief, correct?
Yes. Well, yeah, no, I think that's true. I think that, grief is a composite of a lot of feelings. And at different times and in response to different kinds of loss, different aspects of grief predominate, right? And I think that you touched on one that is a common element of grief, more common than people realize, but it's really dominant right now, and that's fear. And, why do we feel fear? We feel fear about what we've lost and about what we fear to lose, right? So the uncertainty that goes with significant loss is really affecting people right now. And what is it that we have lost? On the one hand, of course, some of what we've lost is people have lost loved ones. People, I mean, and particularly in the New York area where I live, those losses are massive, massive, terrifying. On a broader scale, what people have lost is what we refer to as the assumptive world. And what that means, as the term kind of implies, is that a lot of the core beliefs that we base our lives on, right, that give us a sense of continuity and security, everything from, waking up in the morning and going to Starbucks and having a cup of coffee. Do those things, right? Meeting a friend for lunch, going to work, earning a living, seeing our children, right? Everything big and small. And I want to say that it's important that we recognize that there are big losses, and then there are a host of small, dislocating losses. And we can't ignore those. I really want to encourage people to realize that if what they've lost is the ability to meet their friends, for lunch, or even to, visit people in another state, not go to prom, not finish their school year, these are all losses.
Right.
And all together, they just give us a feeling of not having control over our lives, not being able to predict what's going to happen in our lives. And these are not feelings that we do well with. This is not what is comfortable for us. What's comfortable for us is predictability, continuity, and connection. And those are all the things that we've lost present.
And grief is about dealing with those things we lost. It's not really only death. It can be so many other things, as what you've just said.
Right. That's
and
exactly.
People don't realize that is a way of grieving.
Right. Right. Well, my friend Jack Jordan was asked about this recently. Well, what is grief? And I liked his answer. He said, grief is a response to the loss of anything that we hold dear. Right? Isn't that so good? I thought that was really good. The loss of anything that we hold dear. So, certainly that can be a person. It can certainly, people ask me so often, my dog died, and I feel like I'm feeling grief, but I don't know. And, oh yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Anything we hold dear. If we have to move out of our house because we can't pay the mortgage, that's going to bring up a lot of feelings of grief, right? Somebody who was planning to have her parents come and watch her graduate from college, and now she can't do that. That's a loss. The loss of the rituals that provide comfort when we're grieving is tremendous right now. The fact that people cannot gather together after the loss of a loved one and support one another and honor that person's life together,
Mm-hmm.
together, um, is really impacting a lot of people right now. Not being able to be with loved ones who are in the hospital, very painful for people. So yes, all of these are things that bring about feelings of sadness, yearning, fear, and sometimes hopelessness.
Right.
So it can also enter in there. So, and the fact that these feelings, Sherrie, are so ubiquitous, that they're so widespread, is another layer of difficulty for people who are experiencing a significant loss right now, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because normally we hope that, if I've had a loss, right? My mother-in-law died a few months ago, right?
Mm-hmm.
And a few months ago, my husband got calls from friends, and right, we had Shiva, all of the
Mm-hmm.
things that you do, right? Well, for somebody who experiences a loss like that now, that kind of support really isn't available because everybody's dealing with their own stuff, right?
Right.
So that also makes it hard for people.
And just to hold someone and hug someone.
Oh,
That is one of the great comforts I know when I was grieving the loss of my son, is just to be held, to be hugged, to be someone to hold me within their sacred space. And that
I'm a great
is a
believer.
challenge.
Yeah,
Such a challenge. It's not impossible. Physically, it's impossible right now, but
right,
there's,
right, right. Well, that's really where, I'm a great believer. And if you looked at my website, and I know that you did, you saw that I've also written a book about the role of attachment,
right.
in managing grief, and the relationships that we have from the time that we are born are a source of comfort and sanctuary, a place of solace. It's a place that we feel safe.
Mm-hmm.
And when we don't have access to that, it's very hard for us to feel safe. It's hard for us to feel safe when we're not able to reach out and touch and be held by the people who provide us with with a feeling of security. That's what the whole idea of a secure bond is. Let
Right.
me, come to you, give me a hug, reassure me, comfort me, and then being strengthened by that contact, I can
Mm-hmm.
face the world, right? And now we have to face the world without that, and it's hard. It's hard.
It is. It's a challenge. It's a challenge for all of us. So now that we know what it is,
Yeah,
that we know that our feelings are legitimate,
right.
now that
Absolutely.
we have felt those feelings,
Hmm.
what can we do to help ourselves feel better and help those we love feel better?
Right. Well, someone I was talking to the other day said, we live in a period of both and, in other words, we live at a time where people are still having birthdays and people are dying, right?
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, that kind of paradox in our day-to-day experience, again, is something that we have difficulty with, right?
Mm-hmm.
But to be able to say, we're going to get together on Zoom on Friday, and it's Joanne's birthday, and also, you know, Phyllis just found out that one of her students is sick. So we're going to give space for both of those things, right? And as human beings, we have the capacity to do that. We don't always choose to do it, right? We'd
Mhm.
rather segregate the happy and the sad, right?
Mhm.
Nobody's going to have a wedding and a funeral on the same day, right? But in our interactions with people at this point in time, it's especially important for us to be able to hold the happy events, the things that we're grateful for, at the same time as we acknowledge our, our sadness
Mhm.
and the losses that we've had. To be able to say, I'm grateful for this relationship and I am happy to be able to have this contact with this person. And at the same time, a part of my heart, a part of me is aching
Mhm.
because of what I've lost and because of what other people have lost. So I hope that doesn't sound too abstract, but really what I'm saying is allow the feelings that you have, allow the happy feelings that you have, allow the sad feelings that you have, because sometimes, people suppress the sad feelings, and sometimes people suppress the happy feelings. I shouldn't be feeling happy right now. I shouldn't be celebrating right now because people are dying. I shouldn't be laughing right now because people are dying. Well, I would say that we need to laugh and we need to recognize. I go for a walk any day that it's even moderately
Me too.
warm out, right? And what I've been doing is, every day I look around, and right now in my neighborhood, there are a lot of beautiful flowering trees, right?
Mhm.
And to just stop in front of one of those beautiful flowering trees or in front of just a mass of yellow forsythia and just look at that and, take it in. And when I say take it in, I mean pause and see and feel and just acknowledge that right now, in this moment, I'm here and I'm okay. And I'm in a world where frightening things are happening. And I'm also in a world where there is abundant beauty. And I'm going to really take a moment to appreciate that beauty, because spring has, comes, right?
Mhm.
No matter what's going on in the world,
Yes, it
spring
does.
comes. And we are here, among other things, to notice it.
And we have the time now to notice it.
And we have the time to notice it. And that's a very good point, because we've all heard about how difficult it is, and we all know how difficult it is to be stranded without our usual distractions.
Mhm.
Someone told me the other day, there's a book by Ernst Becker called The Denial of Death, and he's a sociologist. It's a classic. And this person said that Ernst Becker describes a lot of the things we do as immortality projects. In other words, we engage in all kinds of activities so that we don't have to think about the fact that we're going to die. And, what happens when we don't have those things, right? Well, one thing that happens is our initial reaction. I don't know if you've ever gone someplace that's really beautiful and really serene and really out of the way, like a cabin in the woods. And you get there and your first reaction is, what am I going to do for a week? Right? Right. And then after a day or so, everything inside you starts to slow down. And you see things that you don't normally see. And you feel things and you smell things, and maybe you have a conversation with a loved one or with someone even on the phone, and you have thoughts and you take time to go inside yourself. Someone told me recently that in times of plague and depression, a lot of great art happens because people are really slowing down. So, I mean, those are some, kind of more elevated ways of taking care of yourself. But I think the simplest and most important thing that people can do is to maintain their connections with other people. And I say this and I want to acknowledge that sometimes you may not feel like reaching out to other people. And especially if you're grieving or if you're just exhausted, you may say, well, maybe tomorrow I'll call my sister, or, I'll get to it. I just don't feel like doing it right now. And so there's a tendency sometimes when we're grieving to go inside, right?
Mhm.
Kind of shut down. And I want to encourage people to reach out to one another, right? And, even scheduling a regular, saying, let's get together every Friday afternoon and just catch up on our week, right? Um, and that really brings up the whole idea of scheduling and structure, which is something else that I really recommend that people do. If you can have a sense of what you're going to do tomorrow, here's what I have this plan to do these things tomorrow, and I'm not going to plan too much, right? But I'm going to have a few things that I know I'm going to get done. Some people like to be even more regular in their scheduling. I spoke to a client yesterday, and she has Monday, Wednesday, and Friday blocked out for when she does the laundry and when she walks the dogs. And this really helps her, right?
Right.
And for a lot of people, having some structure, particularly if they're used to having their days organized that way,
Right.
can be really helpful.
I'd like to add, I think that sometimes too, I think that don't wait for someone to reach out to you. If you're lonely,
Yes.
say if you're a parent and where are your children, if you're lonely, reach out to your children. You don't know what they're dealing with, what they're going through.
Right.
You're making assumptions inside your head, but you've got to take some kind of responsibility for this as well, for your
Yes,
healing.
that's so true. And that really goes back to something that we were talking about a
Mm-hmm.
little earlier about people who are grieving, right?
Right.
That how many people will say, I'm not going to bother them right now,
Yeah.
right? Because they're grieving, right? You wouldn't say that about somebody who you knew wasn't feeling well. You'd send them a card, you'd give them a call, how's it going, how you feeling? But somehow we get it in our heads that when someone is grieving, we should, leave them alone so that they can grieve. No, right? It's always better to err in the direction of, right, reaching out, making contact. If somebody doesn't want to talk, they'll let you know. But guess what? Most of the time, I know that every phone call I make ends with the person saying, thank you so much for calling, right?
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
So we've seen, some of the things that we've talked about, some of the things that, really can be depressing about this time, can
Yeah.
be very difficult for us to manage during this time. We've
Mhm.
talked about things that we can do to make us feel better. What are some of the blessings that maybe we can look to, the silver linings that we can look to out of
And I
this?
think that there are definitely some of those. I think that one of the things that we can do, one of the things that happens is that in slowing down, right, we have more, I've spoken to people who are spending more time with family members. And, obviously that can be a blessing or a curse, right?
Right.
But, I have two adult children. One of them, my daughter is a doctor in a New York hospital.
Oh.
My son is in California. And, I have pretty regular contact with my daughter. With my son in California, not so much. He's busy, he's working, the time difference.
Mm-hmm.
But since this happened, we have because he's home all the time. So we have much more regular calls. I just feel like both of them are just more available, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that kind of contact. I've talked to people who have said, I have time to learn things now, or to practice things now, like to practice an instrument, or to go online and take an online course that I would never have time to do. I have a client who is a cancer survivor, and since she's been working at home, she's able to cook for herself more regularly. She's able to take walks regularly. Now, that's not to say that people who are working at home don't have their own burdens, particularly if
Right.
they have young children or elderly parents.
Right.
But the flexibility that working from home has given her has allowed her to take better care of
Yeah.
herself.
Better self-care.
Right, right.
Yeah.
And I think that a lot of people have talked about how being deprived of a lot of the activities that are connected with consumption in some form. I'm going to go out shopping here. I'm going to go out, do you know what I'm saying?
Right.
That not having all of those activities in our lives makes us sort of ask ourselves, how much of this do I really need to put back in my life when things return to normal? How much of the slower routine that I've been forced into do I want to retain? What have I found about this period in time that's enabled me to really spend more time with myself, recognizing what I'm feeling, recognizing what I need, recognizing what fuels me, because that's really what we're having to discover at this point in time, right? Because we don't have all of those external sources of distraction. So how do
Well,
I?
for someone like me, I don't mind that. Okay. I don't mind going inward. I don't mind that time of discovery. I crave it,
Yes, I
actually. And I don't
understand.
know if that's my introverted tendencies. I don't know if that's my spiritual path,
You,
my personal path.
it's you.
Yes. But I know that some people can't. I mean, this being with themselves is the scariest thing that can ever happen.
It is the scariest thing that can ever happen. And and of course,
So what do you
people
say to
who,
those people? Yeah.
what's that?
I said, so what do we say to those
Yeah, I
people?
mean, again, I think that for people who are really, comforted, need to talk, want to talk,
Mhm.
so, find people to talk to. There are there are a number of, wow, so many online discussion groups, online support groups. I think that, and I get it. I really do. I get how hard it is, particularly for people who live alone. That this month, for the first time, I think in history, the New York pounds have run out of dogs to adopt.
Oh,
Yeah, right, right. So that tells you something about the need for connection just with another living creature,
yes.
right? So for people, there have been a lot of recommendations about meditative practices and breathing practices and grounding practices. And I know for a lot of people, those recommendations just don't do anything for them because they can't be still long enough
Mm.
to breathe. So, for those people, get outside, exercise, right? Get yourself moving, do to whatever extent you can, find ways to do the things that normally keep
Right.
you going, keep you happy, keep you full. Yeah, you can't get together with 10 other people and, have a party, but I've participated in more than one online bingo tournament. Uh,
Right.
like
There's things to do.
there are a lot of things to do. My son, who is quite outgoing, and and I saw an article just this morning, Sherrie, about how some of these online multiplayer games,
Mm-hmm.
you know that
Right.
this is what people are doing. That I said to him, well, what did you do today? He said, well, first I walked around my island and I watered the plants and I took care of the animals, and then I went and visited other people on their islands. And I'm like, okay, this is my 28-year-old son, and he's visiting people on other islands, and apparently this has become a really big way that people have of continuing to engage with one another. So, there's no question that it's harder for people. And if you are familiar, there's actually a website called Dear Introvert. And it's a website for introverts and sells great merchandise like shirts that say, I was into social distancing before it was cool. But if you go to that website, there are recommendations from introverts for extroverts, like, welcome to our world. We know it's hard for you. Here are some ways that you can, be comfortable and manage these feelings that are easy for us, but we know they're not easy for you.
Right. So to assume that, I have been guilty of saying we're all in the same boat, but we're not. We're all in the same ocean in different kinds of boats and vessels.
I love that. I love that, because you're absolutely right. We're in the same ocean, but some of us are, in cabin cruisers, with a full staff, and some of us are in rickety rowboats, and everybody in between. And on the one hand, we can be grateful. One of my students the other day said to me, well, how do we get through this time? And what do we do? And I said, well, one thing that we can do is we can be grateful that we have food and shelter and that no one is shooting at us. And,
Right.
I said it kind of tongue in cheek, but the fact is I'm really aware
Right.
that to be in a place where I am safe and I have food, I'm very fortunate.
Right.
Not everybody has that. And, I think that we need to, not lose sight of the multiple ways that people are struggling. And, we need to support our local businesses if we can. We need to support our neighbors if we can. We need to be aware of needs that we can help to meet, right? There are lots of things right now that we can't do, but there are also things that we can do. We can reach out to a neighbor if we're able to go to the supermarket. We can reach out to a neighbor and say, I'm going to the supermarket. What can I get for you? Right? If we have, a teenage, son, we can say, go over and, mow our next door neighbors, all the things that, the small things, the small
Right.
neighborly things. We can be patient with one another. We can have compassion for one another, and we can keep in mind that everybody, to one extent or another, is struggling right now. And the truth is that that's always what life is. We just don't normally recognize it. We live in a world, and we have lived in a world really always where there's struggle, where there's suffering, right? Right now, it's particularly clear, right? If you see what I'm saying.
Right.
But, we never know day to day.
This doesn't change. Everybody has it. Yeah.
We never know what somebody else's struggles are, right? And it's the same thing now, but the difference is that because we're all struggling, we can lose sight of what other people are going through. So I would say, let's try not to do that. Let's try to be open to our own feelings, and let's also try to remain aware of what other people are dealing with and to do what we can where we are to help.
That's a beautiful place to stop. Phyllis, thank you so much for taking time today. And you had such great words of wisdom that will help so many people deal with this in a way of hope and healing. So I thank you very much for being my guest today.
You're very welcome. My pleasure.